Yeah, the live stream's not coming up. Okay, we're trying to get that live stream started. Why is it? Okay, it's now live streaming. Okay, now you guys can get started.
Everyone is now live streaming, so I'm going to go ahead and mute myself after you're done.
Okay, Doug, you can get started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Bechtel, and I'll be presiding over this matter. At this time, the court will call the matter of Dakota Weirs v. Lush Fertilizer, Inc., docket number 21 CV 303720. Let me first ask if the plaintiff is ready for trial.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Scoring panelists, both teams have put rosters into the chat. Does everybody have access to those two rosters?
Yes, speaking for, this is Jim Bailey. I have access to both rosters.
Yes, Judge.
Yes, we have access.
Judge Lung?
Yes, Judge Bechtel.
Thank you, sir. Just want to clarify that if anybody is recording, video recording or photographing, that both teams need to approve of the photographing or videoing before. So if that hasn't happened, then you shouldn't be videoing. Also understand that insofar as the teams, as well as the gallery members, that the Colorado Bar Association may be taking photographs, maybe screenshots of the competition during the round, and that team participation in the state tournament grants automatic permission and the use of those photos by the Colorado Bar Association. I don't see anybody, but I'm going to ask if there's anybody that's not connected with teams competing in this round that they leave the courtroom at this time. I'll remind both teams that there are no recesses allowed, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. Starting with you, Mr. Bailey, do you have any reason to believe that you could not be fair or that you are biased towards each team?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Toole, same question to you.
No.
And Judge Lung, same question to you.
No.
Thank you. Remind the teams and the coaches that any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. The teams are reminded that their compliance with the time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. At this time, starting with the plaintiff, I'm going to ask you to introduce your participating team members, namely the attorneys first and then the witnesses.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kate Megan for the plaintiff. I will direct Dr. Casey Rogers and cross-examine Devin Williams and deliver the closing argument. May my co-counsel be permitted to introduce themselves?
Please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Annie Entner. I will direct Dakota Weirs and cross Blake Doncourt and deliver the opening statement.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Paul Doherty. I will direct Carson Durst and cross-examine Skylar Weirs.
Your Honor, may our witnesses be permitted to introduce themselves?
Please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Emma Willie, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Carson Durst, and my name is Luke Braddow, and I am Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I am Mason Walters, and I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Thank you. And defense, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Sasha Latek. I use she, her pronouns, and today I will be conducting the opening statement as well as the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Carson Durst. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is DJ Quinn. I use he, him pronouns. I will be conducting the direct examination of Skylar Weirs, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, and as well as handling preliminary matters.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Ben Harriman. I use he, him pronouns, and I will be conducting the direct of Dr. Devin Williams, the cross of Dr. Casey Rogers, and I will be giving the closing argument. Permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves?
Please.
My name is Max Morin. I use he, him pronouns, and I will be portraying the witness, Blake Doncourt.
My name is Dia Nair. I will be portraying the witness, Skylar Weirs, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Jordan Bard. I will be portraying Dr. Devin Williams, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you. So now we're going to swear in team members, the gallery, the scoring panelists, and the witness. First of all, team members, please raise your right hand. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and the rules of the mock trial competition? And now for the witnesses. Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Thank you. Gallery members, including teachers and attorney coaches, family members and friends, do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? And scoring panelists. If you can please raise your right hand, do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? Thank you. Now, it's my understanding that we've had some bandwidth issues in the past. So what we're going to ask is that only the active participants, the two attorneys that are directing and crossing, and the witness itself be the only ones that have their cameras activated. If everybody else can please deactivate their cameras. And we'll start with the plaintiff. Does the plaintiff have any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. We ask that the stipulations be entered into evidence, please.
Defense position?
Agree.
They are admitted.
Also, that we reserve leftover time of closing argument for a rebuttal close.
Defense, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Granted.
And do the scoring panelists have copies of the exhibits in front of them?
That would be a great question for them.
Yes.
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 There's 3 yeses, perfect.
So then permission to not screen share, or rather just reference those exhibits, please.
That sounds appropriate.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense, any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, do you have copies of all of the exhibits and stipulated facts from the court case?
I do.
Your Honor, permission to stop time in the case of technical difficulties?
That sounds reasonable.
Your Honor, the defense requests that timekeepers be allowed to screen share the exhibits whenever the need arises.
I think we already decided that we weren't actually going to be screen sharing, but should the need arise, the timekeepers can share them.
Your Honor, permission for the exhibits to be constructively published to the jury after the exhibit has been admitted into evidence.
Yes, granted.
And finally, the defense would like y'all to know that we are currently at school and there may be minor disturbances during the trial.
No worries. Just make sure that the timekeepers are aware that to stop the timing if there is an emergency that happens. Are the people ready? I'm sorry. Is the plaintiff ready with their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that?
If you can go ahead and proceed with your opening statement.
Yes. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Members of the jury, my name is Annie Entner, and I represent the plaintiff in this case against Lush Fertilizer, and I represent Dakota Weirs. Members of the jury, this is a case about one thing: corporate greed. Greed that got out of hand. Greed that became more important than the consumer's safety. While a company is certainly entitled to creating and producing a product and making a profit off of that product, they're certainly not allowed to at the expense of their consumers' safety. Unfortunately, this is what happened to a young girl named Dakota Weirs. You will hear today about how Dakota Weirs was a young girl in high school and very active in her community. She loved school, playing in the piano, and just giving back to her community. But all of that was taken away from her because of her job in high school. You see, while she was in high school, Dakota Weirs worked at a landscaping company. While she was at the company, she used a fertilizer, Lush's fertilizer, that contains a chemical called Drufo. Few years later, after using this fertilizer, she became very sick with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This was because of Lush's negligence with their dealing with the chemical Drufo in their fertilizer. You will hear how they were negligent with their chemical in their fertilizer today in 3 ways. First, you will hear how they did not follow industry safety standard. Second, you will hear how they ignored the dangers of Drufo. And third, you will hear how they did not research Drufo as much as they should have. You will hear this evidence from 3 plaintiff witnesses today. First, you will hear from Dakota Weirs herself. You will hear how Ms. Weirs loved playing the piano. You will hear how playing the piano made her feel close to her grandfather, who passed away and was also very skilled at the piano. You will hear how, unfortunately, in high school, Ms. Weirs also had a job at a landscaping company where they used Lush fertilizer. You will hear how, after using the fertilizer, Dakota Weirs felt very sick and could no longer do what she loved doing. You will hear how she had to turn down a scholarship and how her dreams and future were ruined, all because of Lush fertilizer. Dakota Weirs didn't know about Drufo and its dangers, but Lush knew. Lush knew that it was selling poison, but decided to hide it. You will hear how Dakota Weirs and her father found out that the exact same fertilizer is sold in France, but without the chemical Drufo, thus showing that Lush fertilizer knew that Drufo was dangerous and chose to hide it. Second, you will hear from Carson Durst. Carson Durst worked at Lush Fertilizer for 3 years. You will hear how he was a good friend of the Doncourts too, who own Lush Fertilizer. You will hear how he studied Drufo and found that it was indeed dangerous and could be carcinogenic. He will tell you that Lush ignored his research and his findings, and so he quit. You will hear how he left Lush Fertilizer because he didn't want to be part of a company that ignored damaging information. Last, you will hear from Dr. Casey Rogers. You will hear about his studies and tests on Drufo and his findings that, yes, Drufo is indeed carcinogenic and caused Ms. Weir's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Most importantly, though, you will hear from Dr. Casey Rogers about how Lush Fertilizer failed to study Drufo as much as they should have. At the end of the trial today, we will ask you to vote in favor of the plaintiff because of the preponderance of evidence that Lush was indeed negligent with their chemical Drufo, but chose to hide it, which ruined Dakota Weir's future and dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the defense prepared to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Picture this: thousands of miles of ocean where little to nothing lives. You're probably asking yourself, why does nothing live there? The short answer, pollution. What causes this pollution? Synthetic nitrogen in fertilizer that causes algae and bodies of water to bloom faster than the ecosystem can handle. Why is this bad? It causes large amounts of fish to die and toxins and bacteria to grow. A solution to this pollution, Drufo. What are the benefits of using Drufo, the bonding agent in Lush Fertilizer? Decrease in nitrogen runoff, decrease in the amount it needs to be applied per year, decrease exposure to the product. In essence, Lush Fertilizer's responsibility is to deliver a safe, reliable product that decreases nitrogen pollution. Not only do they show this commitment through their products, but with their significant charity work as well. Dakota Weir's worked at Havens Landscaping for a number of years. Dakota's responsibility while working there was to wear protective gear, such as long sleeves, pants, and a mask. You'll find that Dakota didn't consistently wear protective gear. Even though her boss told her to do so, even though she was working with chemicals that had warning labels on them, even though those chemicals could cause her to develop something like cancer. Dakota wants you to believe that Drufo is the cause of her cancer. The fact is, Dakota worked with harmful chemicals and fertilizers longer than she ever did with Lush Fertilizer. Those products are the reason Dakota developed cancer, not Drufo. This case is about responsibility. The responsibility Lush Fertilizer had when putting products on the market. The responsibility Dakota Weir's had when working with harmful chemicals and fertilizers. You'll hear from founder and CEO Blake Doncourt. He'll tell you that the company's extensive research and testing before putting their products on the market did not identify cancer to be a specific risk. And the reason Lush doesn't put any warning labels on their products is because there's little to no risk while using them. This fact isn't just verified by Lush, but by the EPA. Dr. Rogers, an agricultural researcher, conducted a study on Drufo, where he observed 3 groups' exposure to varying amounts of Drufo. Dr. Rogers' study was inconclusive because he failed to take into account how the use of protective gear could affect the individuals using the products. His study also hasn't been peer-reviewed. Dr. Devin Williams, who leads the toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer, will explain to you the discrepancies in Dr. Rogers' study. Dr. Devin Williams will also confirm that the use of Drufo is not correlated with an increase in developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other cancer. Carson Durst was someone who worked on the development of Lush. His responsibility was to research the safety of a particular chemical compound in Drufo. Even though it was Carson's job to research this and to talk about these concerns, he never talked about them until he began working for Terra's Greenery, Lush's biggest competitor. Skylar Weirs is an investigative journalist whose responsibility is to put out information that is true and accurate. Skylar will explain to you that Drufo is a much safer alternative than other pesticides and fertilizers. She'll tell you that there's a much clearer link between the use of those pesticides and cancer than the use of Drufo and cancer. We are in this courtroom today because of negligence, which is when a person's failure to use reasonable care causes harm. Both the plaintiff and defense have to meet a burden of proof, which is preponderance of the evidence. Think of preponderance of the evidence like a scale of justice. On the plaintiff's side, how much Lush Fertilizer was negligent. On the defense's how much Dakota Weirs was negligent. As you listen, you'll place pieces of evidence on either side of the scale. If you believe that Lush Fertilizer is completely at fault for not warning their consumers about the probability of harm while using their products, you must turn in a verdict for the plaintiff. If you believe that Dakota Weirs is completely at fault for not following safety recommendations, you must turn in a verdict for the defense. If you believe that Lush Fertilizer is at fault, you must also consider how much Dakota is at fault and how much her negligence contributed to her harm. Members of the jury, at the end of this trial, you'll find that Drufo isn't the reason Dakota developed cancer, or even Lush's supposed greed. It was her lack of responsibility that did.
Thank you. Can the plaintiff call their first witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff would like to call Dakota Weirs to the stand, please.
Ms. Weirs, I'll remind you that you have already taken an oath. Please proceed.
Ms. Weirs, can you please state and spell your name for the court?
My name is Dakota Weirs, Dakota Weirs.
Why are you here today, Ms. Weirs?
I'm suing Lush Fertilizer because their products made me sick.
Can you please elaborate on why you are suing Lush Fertilizer?
Well, I was recently diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which I believe is the sole cause of my use of Lush Fertilizer, which contains ingredients that have been deemed unsafe. Lush Fertilizer ruined my life and is stolen my future.
She's reading the answer. What was your life like before you were diagnosed with cancer?
Well, usually I was super busy. So with the time that I had, I would volunteer at local homeless shelters. I loved helping people. I also would go and just help the people around me. And I also excelled in school. I just loved being involved.
Was there anything else that you enjoyed doing before you were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Yes, the best part of my life was playing piano. Because I got sick, I can't play anymore.
And why was the piano so important to you?
Well, since I was very little, my grandfather would play the piano for me. I would sit under and just listen to him play. I fell in love with it at a young age. When he passed away, when I was 7, I started learning how to play because it felt like the only way I could be close to him. And as I got older, I got better. People started coming to watch me perform. It was my life. I even got a prestigious scholarship to Juilliard. That all changed when I got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Sorry, give me 1 second. And what ruined your future with the piano and your scholarship?
Well, because of my sickness, I couldn't do anything. I had to lay on the couch. I got chills. My lymph nodes were swollen. I really couldn't do anything. I even had to turn down the scholarship. It really was the worst thing that had ever happened to me.
Was there anything else that you did in high school?
I worked for a landscaping company since I was 14.
Were you told to wear protective clothing while you worked at the landscaping company?
Well, our boss told us we should, but nobody ever really did it. And we were all 14 years old. We all loved to be out in the sunshine, especially me. And I never really thought of the consequences because I was 14 years old and no one else did it anyway.
Was there anything else that led you to believe Drufo made you sick?
Yeah, I have a twin, Skylar. We did everything together except for that landscaping job. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is caused by environmental things, and that was the only thing I had done that my sister hadn't. So it didn't make sense why me and my sister wouldn't both have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma if it wasn't because of the fertilizer we had used.
When did all of this click for you? Like, when did you realize all of this?
Well, one day I was just laying on the couch, watching the news because that's all I could do because I was sick. And I saw this ad that said Drufo had something in it that could cause cancer. This really interested me, and I decided to look more into it.
And what did you do right after you had heard this information?
Well, I called my boss to see if I could get a copy of the fertilizer we had used, specifically Lush fertilizer, because that was what was on the news.
Ms. Weirs, do you have a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 1 in front of you?
Yes.
Can you please identify it?
This is the label my boss sent me of the Lush fertilizer label.
And you can confirm that this is the exact copy of the label that you received from your boss?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move for the admission of Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Defense position?
No objections, Your Honor.
Without objection, plaintiff's Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Ms. Weirs, can you please tell us what the active ingredients are?
The active ingredients are Drufo, basically.
Okay. Did you see this label while you worked for Havens?
No, I never saw it.
Is there anything else about this label that stood out to you?
Well, I found it interesting that in other countries, well, me and my father did some research. We wanted to see if other countries also had Drufo in them. Other countries that sold Lush fertilizer. So we looked it up and we found that in other countries such as France, because my father is fluent in French, they didn't have Drufo in them. This didn't make sense. Why would other countries not have Drufo, but America, yes?
Okay, before we move on, was there anything about the warning on the label that surprised you?
I think what surprised me was that there really was nothing that said that it could cause cancer, because Drufo really it should say that there is a possibility of it causing cancer, right? So why wouldn't they put it on there?
Okay, let's move on to the French fertilizer that you had mentioned. Ms. Weirs, do you have a copy of Exhibit 2 in front of you?
Yes.
Can you please identify it?
This is a copy of a French label that me and my father translated.
Your Honor, at this time, I move for the admission of Exhibit 2.
Defense position on plaintiff's Exhibit 2.
Objection, hearsay.
Plaintiff response?
Your Honor, this is an exception to hearsay because this is not being used for the truth of the matter asserted. We are just confirming that this is the translation that she saw.
Plaintiff, what's the relevance if we are not paying attention to the actual contents of the exhibit?
We are we are looking strictly at this is what she saw.
The objection is sustained.
Okay, then I will move on. Ms. Weirs, I would like to go back to the label one last time. So just to confirm, you did not see this while you worked at landscaping?
No, I never saw it.
Okay, thank you. No more questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Defense cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Let's begin by discussing your experience with fertilizer products. You've worked for Havens Landscaping since you were 14?
Yeah, I worked there since I was 14.
During your employment, you worked in a variety of indoor and outdoor settings?
Yeah, I did.
Lush fertilizer was a product you used during your employment?
Yeah.
You stopped using Lush about 3 years into your employment with Havens?
Yes, I did, but we had used it for 3 years.
For about the last half of your career at Havens, you didn't use Lush fertilizer at all?
I only worked there while I was in high school, so it was only the last year.
Aside from Lush's products, you also use several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals?
Yes, we did.
Those products often had warning labels on them?
Well, I'm not sure. I never got to see any of the labels.
You're aware that warnings help customers take certain precautions while using potentially dangerous products?
Yes, but there's no guarantee those people will do it.
Please refer to Exhibit 1, which has already been admitted into evidence. Please follow along while I read the safety recommendations. Utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended. You didn't wear gloves while working with lawn chemicals?
No, I did not.
You didn't wear long sleeves?
We didn't because nobody else did.
You didn't wear long pants?
Again, nobody else did, so I didn't either.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Plaintiff, redirect.
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Either side have any objection to this witness being excused?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Plaintiff, call your second witness, please.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Carson Durst to the stand.
Mr. Durst, I will remind you that you are under oath.
Will you please state your name and spell it for the court, Mr. Durst?
My name is Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
Where did you get your education?
Arizona State University, a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering.
Where are you currently employed and what is your position currently?
I'm at Terrace Greenery currently, and I'm a lead production engineer.
Okay.
Sorry, lead production developer.
Okay. What does being a lead production developer entail?
I oversee fertilizers and our other lawn enhancement products.
What do Lush and Terrace Greenway both have in common?
Well, they both produce fertilizer and are competitors in that.
Okay. And where did you work before you worked at Terrace Greenway?
I began working for Lush after I graduated from ASU.
Okay. What work did you do for Lush?
I started as an intern in 2003. I quickly ascended, and within 3 months, I was at a full-time position. Some people might chalk this up to my relationships with the Doncords, but I assure you, I was fully qualified for that job and performing at a higher level.
What was the biggest assignment that you got while employed by Lush?
Right, I worked on a Drufo, their chemical bonding agent that Lush developed to keep its fertilizer products preserved. Chemical formula for Drufo. They developed over the course of a few years, starting in 2001. And when I joined the company in 2003, Lush was in the process of testing the safety of their bonding agent.
Okay. Could you please turn to Exhibit 4 in your document?
Of course.
Do you have a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 4 in front of you?
I do.
You are seeing what has been marked as Exhibit 4 for identification purposes. Do you recognize this exhibit?
It's an email from Jerry Langley.
Who is Jerry Langley?
He is she was the product manager for Drufo, and she oversaw my work with Lush.
Is email a method of communication regularly used by Lush?
I would say not just Lush, just any fertilizer company.
Is this document a fair and accurate representation of the email that you originally received?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Plaintiff's position on Exhibit 4.
I object to hearsay, Your Honor.
Plaintiff response.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 803, this is a business record exception to the hearsay rule.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Please.
So 8036 is sorry. 8036 is what you're referring to. While companies do send emails back and forth, the particular makeup of this email isn't a regularly conducted business activity.
I agree this is not a business record. So at this point, the court will uphold the objection and not allow this exhibit.
Approximately how long have when did Lush complete its analysis of Drufo?
About around December of 2003.
What happened when the analysis was completed?
Well, we had a meeting in one of our conference rooms to discuss the findings, and one scientist in particular was concerned because her analysis of Drufo, one, linked it to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and that it was possibly carcinogenic.
Objection, hearsay.
Response.
Your Honor, this statement is not being offered for the truth of the matter. Rather, it is being asserted to prove that this conversation did happen and that Lush managers did have notice of possible concern.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
So the truth of the matter is whether this is being used for the potential carcinogenicity of Drufo. What Lush is doing with this information would go to the truth of the matter asserted.
The court will admit the statement for non-hearsay. It's not being admitted for the contents. It's being admitted to show knowledge. So the objection's overruled.
Did you ever receive a final report from the study of Drufo?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Did you ever receive a final report from the study of Drufo?
Sorry. Yes, about a month after the meeting, a copy of that same report hit my desk.
What was your reaction to this report?
I believe it was misleading. It seemed to me, based on my participation in the research, that a bit of the data was left out of the final report.
Okay. Was there anything else about Drufo in the report?
Well, the report recommended that in baking Drufo, they could eliminate the possibility that it would be carcinogenic.
Was there anything in the report noting the scientist's concern about possible link to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, nothing in the report reflected the concern.
What happened after you saw this report?
Well, I started to receive a lot more pushback from the senior members for my getting priority in choice assignments. My annual reviews also began to reflect their same changed opinions.
What happened after this?
I was confronted by the executive team, and based on the complaints about my position and my qualifications, I was put on a performance improvement plan and was placed on probationary status with the company.
Then what happened?
I had another horrible performance review in early 2005. So I went to Blake to see if he could speak to Jerry for me. That conversation did not go as I hoped.
How so?
Well, Blake didn't support me at all. He said I'd have to work out my problems with Jerry on my own.
Okay. So what did you do after this?
Well, that said, I could see the writing on the wall, and it was clear I didn't have any future at Lush. So I began immediately searching for a new job. That's how I got this current job at Terrace Greenery not without interference from Lush.
Did Lush prevent you from obtaining this new job?
They definitely tried to. They took me to court, even though they had me ultimately fired. But we resolved it by me not working at Terrace for 6 months.
Okay. So why are you here testifying against Lush today?
Why I suspect the defense say I do it out of my grudge for Blake Doncourt. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do. I just don't like the way Lush handled the study of Drufo.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Durst. Let's talk about the study you found during your research of a compound in Drufo that suggested this compound was carcinogenic in rats.
Yes, Lush.
You researched a particular chemical compound in Drufo?
Yes.
You found a study from England that suggested this compound was carcinogenic in rats?
Yes.
You documented this information in your lab notebook?
I did.
Please refer to Exhibit 3. Mr. Durst, do you recognize Exhibit 3?
I do.
This is the study that concluded this particular chemical compound you were studying was carcinogenic in rats.
It appears so, yes.
You know this because you documented this in your lab notebook.
I do. I did.
This is a complete and accurate copy of this study.
It is.
I move to admit Exhibit 3.
Defense position?
Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Your Honor, I'm not using this study for the truth of the matter asserted, only for the effect on the listener.
Response?
Your Honor, this document, she's attempting to use this document to prove what the witness did or what the witness's study was concluding about.
The court will admit Exhibit 3 for the non-hearsay purpose of the effect on the, I guess, the reader.
This is the study you believe suggests that Drufo may be carcinogenic.
Yes.
This study intended to simulate the compound's potential carcinogenic effects.
Correct.
Specifically at a quantity similar to what humans in jobs involving frequent unprotected exposure to this compound would face.
So to be clear, the rats aren't humans, but humans with similar conditions. Sorry, rats with similar conditions, correct?
According to this compound, according to this study, this compound was added to the rat's standard diet.
Yes.
So the rats were ingesting this compound orally.
Yes.
Starting on the 12th day of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Until natural death.
Until natural death, yes.
The results show that rats that were exposed to this compound during prenatal life were more likely to develop cancer.
Correct.
Prenatal meaning before birth.
Correct, but it seems that the ones that were exposed after birth also still had some cases of cancer.
You did not find any study on this compound's effect in humans.
No, that is why we did one. We're going to do another study.
Outside of Lush.
No, inside of Lush.
You did not find any studies outside of Lush pertaining to this compound's effect in humans.
No.
Only rats that ingested this compound orally.
Correct.
Let's talk about your employment with Lush Fertilizer. While you were working for Lush, the quality of your work was criticized.
It was.
Ultimately, the executive team at Lush confronted you about the mounting complaints about your job performance.
And then they put me on a probationary status. Correct.
You were put on a performance improvement plan.
Yes.
Let's discuss the non-comp agreement that you signed with Lush when you first began working there. You signed a non-comp agreement with Lush.
Correct.
By signing this, you agreed to not disclose Lush Fertilizer's trade secrets.
Correct.
You agreed not to work for any company that would benefit from this disclosure of those trade secrets.
Where does it say that on the non-compete agreement?
Specifically in the non-compete agreement, although it hasn't been admitted into evidence. Your Honor, would you like me to admit it into evidence?
If he's going to be discussing the contents of it, it will need to be admitted.
Please refer to Exhibit 5. Do you recognize?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Durst, do you recognize Exhibit 5?
I do.
This is the non-comp agreement you signed.
It is.
You know what this is because you signed it.
Because I signed it, yes.
This is a complete and accurate copy of this study, or
Yes.
excuse me, of this agreement.
Complete.
Companies usually have their employees sign non-comp agreements.
It's standard practice for a field like this.
I move to admit Exhibit 5.
Plaintiff's position.
Honor, how is this document relevant to the current case? I do not see how this non-compete agreement is relevant in any way to the current matter of hand, as whether or not Lush is liable for Dakota Weir's illness.
So the plaintiff is objecting to the admission?
Yes.
Okay. Response?
Your Honor, this non-comp agreement outlines what Carson Durst was supposed to do while Carson worked for Terrace Greenery after Lush. Terrace Greenery is one of Lush's biggest competitors, and it would go to the motive behind why Carson is testifying today.
The court will admit people, or I'm sorry, I guess it's Defense Exhibit 5. It does show the relationship between the witness and the defendant, so it will be admitted.
This non-comp agreement states that you are not allowed to work for a company that would benefit from the disclosure of trade secrets.
Correct, which is why we came to the agreement that I would not work for Terrace Greenery until 6 months after I was fired.
When you were fired from Lush Fertilizer, you had already been hired by Terrace Greenery.
Correct.
You had applied at Terrace Greenery while you were still employed by Lush.
Yes.
You applied to Terrace Greenery after a particular heated conversation with Blake Doncourt.
Not immediately after it, but during that time, yes.
You applied at Terrace Greenery to, quote, get Blake scoped.
Correct. Scope that.
Blake and the CEO of Terrace Greenery have nothing but bad blood between them.
Could you repeat the question?
Blake and the CEO of Terrace Greenery.
This speculation.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the original question?
Blake and the CEO of Terrace Greenery had nothing but bad blood between them.
Okay, can you respond to the defense's objection, or I'm sorry, to the plaintiff's objection?
Your Honor, any company, any rivaling company would have not great relations between the CEOs. Also, Carson Durst worked at Lush Fertilizer and was able to observe this as Carson had an intimate relationship with Blake Doncourt.
What is the relevance of the relationship between the two CEOs?
It goes to testifying because Carson works at Terrace Greenery. It goes to the credibility of why he is testifying today.
Plaintiff, any response?
Your Honor, how would he would not reasonably know if they had bad blood between them. He couldn't have known what was going on between them. He was simply lower in the company than the higher management.
So you're changing your objection to foundation?
Yes.
Can I get a response to the foundation objection?
Yes, Your Honor. In direct examination, it was laid out that Carson Durst had an intimate relationship with Blake Doncourt, and so he was able to observe anything like this. If if you would like me to lay foundation in my cross, I am able to do so.
So the objection to foundation is sustained, but I will allow you to go in and lay a foundation.
Mr. Durst, you had an intimate relationship with Blake Doncourt.
And his son, yes.
You talked about a manner of things.
Could you repeat the question?
You talked about a lot of things.
Yes.
You were able to observe Blake Doncourt while he was working for Lush.
Yes.
You were able to observe relations that he may or may not have at Lush Fertilizer.
Correct.
Blake and the CEO of Terrace Greenery had nothing but bad blood between them.
Correct.
When Lush found out you were hired by Terrace Greenery, a legal battle ensued.
Correct.
You oversee Terrace Greenery development of its line of fertilizers and lawn enhancement products.
Yes.
In your first few years at Terrace Greenery, you've mainly worked on a new product that's on the verge of outperforming Lush's equivalent on the market.
Correct.
Let's discuss some opportunities you had at Lush. You had the opportunity to directly talk to Blake Doncourt.
I did.
While you were working for Lush Fertilizer, you never took the opportunity to voice any concerns about Drufo to Blake Doncourt.
Not to Blake Doncourt.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Plaintiff, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, while you did not voice these these concerns directly to Blake Doncourt, did you voice them to your supervisor?
I did.
Objection, unfair extrapolation.
Plaintiff, can you respond to the objection?
Yes, Your Honor. He worked directly under. Where was it? Let me just find the document so I can read you the line number for it. He voiced his concerns. Let's see. Your Honor, he clearly states in his witness statement that he submitted reports to the upper management, which would entail his supervisor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Please.
The line opposing counsel is referring to is that Carson Durst put the documents, particularly of the study found in England about the carcinogenicity of this compound in rats. He submitted this in his lab notebook, and his upper manager, Gary Langley, was supposed to look through these lab notebooks. However, Carson Durst never directly states in his affidavit that he went directly to any of his upper managers and stated his concerns about Drufo.
Thank you. This instruction is directed to the scoring panelists. You, the scoring panelists, are the sole arbiters of the dispute. Based upon your own individual observations, good faith judgment, and consistent with the intent of the judicial process, you may conclude A, there was no extrapolation, or B, the statement was not unfair extrapolation, or the question did not ask for unfair extrapolation as it was not material, or C, the statement was unfair extrapolation as it was material. The ultimate decision is in the discretion of each of the individual scoring panelists. Consistent with your decision, you may award one or more points, deduct one or more points, or take no action at all with respect to any of the parties involved. If you determine that there was no unfair extrapolation, you may deduct one or more points from the objecting party if you believe that the objection was not made in good faith, was improvident, or was poor sportsmanship. Your decision is final. Please proceed, plaintiff.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect, or I'm sorry, recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. This witness be excused. Plaintiff, call your third witness, please.
Your Honor, the plaintiff call. Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Dr. Rogers, good afternoon. I'll remind you that you are under oath.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hello, can you please state and spell your name for the court?
Hello, my name is Dr. Casey Rogers, Rogers.
Thank you. Dr. Rogers, what do you do for a living?
Currently, I work as a professor in the horticulture and entomology department at University of California, Berkeley.
Have you received any education in this area?
Yes, first I got my Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture and chemistry at Colorado State University. I then went on to get my PhD in agriculture and entomology at University of California, Berkeley.
Do you have any prior work experience in this field?
I do. Prior to earning my PhD, I worked as a research analyst for a large multinational chemical company.
What were your duties as a research analyst?
I worked in the chemical industry as a consultant working with clients to solve their specific business problems by collecting, summarizing, analyzing, and synthesizing the information at hand.
Have you done research or written any articles of your own in these areas?
Of course, I've been studying the effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals on the body for years. I've published numerous amounts of scholarly articles, and I've researched DRUFO before along with other herbicides. Most of my research is focused on the negative, harmful effects of various chemicals, including DRUFO, on the human body.
Your Honor, the plaintiff offers Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert witness in the fields of agriculture, horticulture, and chemical effects on the human body pursuant to Rule 702.
Defense position.
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will receive Dr. Rogers as an expert in agricultural, horticultural, and effects on the human body, and he can render opinions in that area.
Dr. Rogers, have you heard of DRUFO before?
Of course I have. I've been researching the negative effects of DRUFO for years. It first caught my attention when it came to market. Since then, I've researched it on my own and made recommendations to regulatory agencies who have trusted my expertise. My research on the chemical has also been used in litigation before.
Could you please explain what DRUFO is?
DRUFO is a patented product that Lush uses in all of their products as a bonding agent. In simpler terms, it's what they use to make it so the fertilizer stays preserved and intact.
What were your first thoughts about this chemical?
As I mentioned before, I heard about DRUFO right when it came to market. I was worried about its effects from the beginning, and I began seeing reports from my colleagues about potential negative effects DRUFO may have.
What did you decide to do about these worries?
I decided it was in my best interest to conduct my own study on the chemical and truthfully find out if there were any adverse health effects in people who had prolonged exposure to DRUFO.
How did you set up this study?
In this study, I had 3 groups participating. One group who was never exposed to DRUFO, a group of people who was exposed to DRUFO on an occasional basis, and a group of people who are exposed to DRUFO a lot and daily. I then compared these groups back to the control group and monitored them for health conditions.
What were the results of your study?
My studies found a serious increase in health diagnosis in those who are exposed to DRUFO as compared to the control group.
What types of health conditions were found to be influenced by DRUFO exposure?
My study showed that individuals that were exposed to DRUFO have higher incidences of cancer, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Specifically, we saw that folks with prolonged exposure were 10 times more likely to be diagnosed than those with no exposure, and 5 times more likely than those who had occasional exposure. There's a strong correlation between DRUFO exposure and endocrine and exocrine-based cancers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Have you studied non-Hodgkin lymphoma before?
Yes, I have. I needed knowledge on this topic to use in my studies of chemicals in the body.
Could you please explain what it is for the jury?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a type of cancer which affects white blood cells or lymphocytes. These cells are part of the body's immune system, which helps fight off deadly diseases.
How does one develop this disease?
Unlike many cancers, non-Hodgkin lymphoma is not genetic. It is instead contracted by the environment, and it is also, for example, exposure to pesticides and, for example, exposure to pesticides that are absorbed into the body.
How does this disease affect a person's life?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a non-curable illness. While it can be controlled, it will never go away. Ms. Weirs will live with the disease forever. It also greatly damaged the immune system. It also will greatly damage her immune system. Those with this illness become immune compromised and face many other health conditions, such as non-Hodgkin, and can face many other health conditions, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Are you familiar with Ms. Dakota Weir's experience with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Yes, I am. I reviewed her medical and employment records in preparation of this case.
How would exposure to Drufo have led to her non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Ms. Weirs was subjected to prolonged exposure to Drufo without the use of protective gear. Over her 4 years in these conditions, the foreign particles entered her body through the space between her skin and lung tissue. Then these particles began to damage the lymph cells, a major part of the immune system. The damaged cells accumulated in the lymph nodes. The concentration of the damaged cells then overwhelmed the immune function of the lymphocyte cells. The result of this is metastasizing cancerous masses. After an attack like that on the immune system, it is almost inevitable that lymphoma of any sort will be found.
What conclusions did you take from this study?
Because of my study, we know that there is a high degree of medical probability that Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by prolonged exposure to Drufo.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Defense Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Casey Rogers. Let's start by discussing your testimony here today. This is the first time you've ever testified as an expert witness?
Yes, I don't see how that changes my testimony.
If this case goes the way you want, it will open the door to class action lawsuits.
I guess so, but like I said before, my study has been used in litigation before.
And do you want to be on the forefront of that battle?
Can you repeat the question?
You'd like to be on the forefront of that battle?
I mean, sure, it would be nice, but I'm not testifying for that reason.
Let's talk about your study on Drufo. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma can be caused by pesticides.
Correct.
You conducted your own study on non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes.
The people who were exposed to Drufo for long periods of time were farmers?
Yes.
Being farmers, they also could have been exposed to pesticides as well.
Correct.
Pesticides are known to be carcinogenic.
Yes.
So your farmers were exposed to a number of dangerous environmental conditions that could have caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma as well?
Yes.
Let's move on to your suggestions on how to avoid non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You advise that anyone working with Drufo should wear long sleeves and long pants, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Weirs did not wear any protective gear?
No, she didn't.
And Ms. Weirs was advised to wear this protective gear on labels?
On labels that she never saw.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Plaintiff redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. This witness is excused. Does the plaintiff have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests.
Thank you. Defense.
The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Blake Doncourt, I'll remind you that you are under oath.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. Please state your name and spell your last for the jury.
My name is Blake Doncourt. That's spelled Doncourt.
Let's begin by talking about your occupation. What is your job?
I am the founder and CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
How did you expand Lush Fertilizer into what it is today?
Since the year 2000, I've taken Lush from a no-name fertilizer to one of the biggest fertilizer companies on the market.
What is Lush Fertilizer's core product?
Our core product is our Star Lush Fertilizer, and it has a bonding agent called Drufo.
Let's talk about one of the people who helped develop Drufo. How do you know Mr. Durst?
He was my son's best friend, and out of college, I gave him an internship here at Lush in our R&D department.
When Mr. Durst was working for you, did he ever talk about his concerns surrounding Drufo?
He never brought up any sort of concerns with me or anyone else at Lush.
Did your company have an implicit rule that there should be no written communications regarding safety concerns with Drufo?
We never had any sort of implied rule like that. We would always want to make sure that our products are environmentally and humanely safe.
Did the search of your computers ever come up with an email suggesting otherwise?
The search of our computers brought up no such email that Carson claims is there.
Let's talk about the non-comp agreement Mr. Durst signed with Lush at the time of his employment. What does this non-comp agreement outline?
Basically, to summarize, it states that if Carson were to leave our company, which they did, that they would not disclose any of our trade secrets.
Do you believe Mr. Durst disclosed trade secrets?
Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, Blake Doncourt is only testifying to what he believes, not what other people believe.
Any reply?
Yes. Mr. Doncourt is not an expert, so he has no right to give his opinion.
I believe the question was, does he believe? And I believe that he can answer that. The objection's overruled.
Do you believe Mr. Durst disclosed trade secrets?
I absolutely do. After Carson left Lush Fertilizer, he went off to our biggest rival, Terrace Greenery, and they have released a fertilizer that's similar to Lush Fertilizer in every single way, and they're claiming it's non-carcinogenic.
Let's move on to talking about safety concerns surrounding Drufo. Did any of the studies Lush conducted conclude that the use of Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Our own toxicology research team, led by Dr. Devin Williams, showed that there's no signs of Drufo being carcinogenic.
Did any outside sources verify this?
Yes, even the EPA did their own outside and separate research from us that showed that there's no health concerns with Drufo, including it being possible carcinogenic.
Were you ever given a reason to believe that Drufo was carcinogenic?
I was never given a valid reason inside Lush or outside Lush.
What would you have done if there were valid scientific studies that had indicated there were risks from using Drufo?
If there were any valid research studies, I would have immediately pulled Drufo from our fertilizer and made a new bonding agent to do what Drufo obviously could not.
What safety recommendations are on Lush Fertilizer's labels?
That you wear basic long sleeve pants and shirt.
Let's talk about basing Lush Fertilizer's products. Why would the company consider baking its products?
It would remove any theoretical risk of our fertilizers being carcinogenic.
Why doesn't the company bake its products?
It is far too costly for what little or really no risk there is.
What was the estimated total revenue loss from 2004 to 2014 if your company had baked its products?
That would have been over $10 million.
How did you use the money that was saved from not baking your products?
Well, I'm able to give my employees better salaries and benefits, but I'm also able to give 10% of our profits to charities around the world, and our own charity set about removing the world's nitrogen footprint, which really is an underrated aspect of our world's pollution.
Has Lush Fertilizer won any awards for its charity work?
Yes, Lush has received the seal of business sustainability.
How does Lush's charity work contribute to their products?
It shows to our consumers that we want to be environmentally and humanely safe.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, Lush's fertilizer contains Drufo, correct?
That is correct. We develop it in-house.
Baking the Drufo would have removed any risk of the fertilizer being carcinogenic, correct?
Yeah, I would have removed the theoretical risk, but there wasn't that risk.
And Lush decided not to bake its Drufo.
Like I said, it was really costly and there wasn't any risk of it being carcinogenic, so we decided to not.
By not baking the Drufo, you found that you would increase Lush's profits by 6% in the first year, correct?
Yes, because at that time we were a very small company and we needed any sort of advantage we could get. And plus, with the reassurance that our fertilizer was not carcinogenic, I decided to go ahead and not bake our fertilizer.
And a yes or no answer will do for this question. By not baking Drufo, Lush would increase its profits by 2% every year after that initial year, correct?
Correct.
So by not eliminating the potential threat of the cancer threat in Drufo, Lush increased its profits.
That is correct, because there is no risk of Drufo being carcinogenic.
Theoretically, if the general public knew that Drufo was unsafe and that Drufo is
Objection, speculation.
Let me hear the entire question. Please don't answer until we've addressed the objection.
If the general public knew that Drufo was unsafe and that Drufo is in Lush fertilizer, Lush sales would likely decline, correct?
And the objection basis again, I'm sorry.
Speculation, Your Honor.
Response?
I am merely asking Mr. Doncourt about his sales and what would happen to them based on whether or not the public knew that his fertilizer was safe or not. I think that Mr. Doncourt is fully able to answer this question.
At this point, I don't think a sufficient foundation has been laid to show his knowledge. So at this point, it would be speculation. The objection is sustained, although you can lay a further foundation.
Okay, I will move on. If sales decline, Lush's profits would also decline, correct?
Can you re-ask that question real quick?
Yes. If sales of Lush's fertilizer decline, Lush's profits would also decline, correct?
Yes, that is correct. That's kind of how money works.
If the general public found out that Lush's products were unsafe, Lush's reputation would suffer, correct?
Objection, speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, this is a simple question based on the question that I asked above. This is very logical, and since Mr. Doncourt is the CEO of the company, he knows this.
I'll overrule this one for speculation. Please answer the question.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Doncourt?
That would be appreciated.
If the general public knew that Lush's fertilizer was unsafe, Lush's reputation would suffer, correct?
If our fertilizer was dangerous and if the public found out, then yeah, it would ruin our reputation. But it's not any concern with health.
A yes or no answer will do for this question. I want to talk more about the bags. Your fertilizer is sold in bags, and those bags of fertilizer display a safety warning, correct?
Could you re-ask that question?
Your fertilizer is sold in bags. Those bags, my question is, those bags of fertilizer display a safety warning, correct?
Yes, our containers do contain a safety warning.
Can you please reference Exhibit 1? Do you have Exhibit 1 in front of you?
I do.
Okay. And the label recommends protective clothing.
That is correct. It recommends long sleeve shirts and pants and facial covering.
And you would only wear covering if a product was not safe, correct?
That is correct.
Most people use fertilizer in the summer, correct?
Yes.
And it is usually very hot in the summer, correct?
That is correct, but we put that warning label on because we just want to take that extra step to make sure our product is completely safe and people know how to be safe with it.
Most people, however, do not wear long clothing in the summer, even if they know what the rules are, correct?
That is correct, but I don't feel like that's kind of outside of our field of responsibility, though, if they choose not to wear what we recommend for safety.
But your company could have foreseen the fertilizer being used the way Ms. Weird used it without the covering, correct?
Yes, but that's why we put the warning on there to tell people that you need to be wearing the stuff to make sure you are safe while using our product.
If your fertilizer was found to be carcinogenic, then a warning on your fertilizer would be needed, correct?
Yes, if there were, which there isn't, yes, there would be needed an extra label to warn people that our fertilizer might be carcinogenic to them.
I want to talk to you now about what Lush knew about Drufo. Carson Durst worked at Lush as a product development engineer, correct?
Yes, we had him in our R&D department, and I assigned him to research safety concerns with Drufo.
You claim that the existence of Carson Durst's email warning about the dangers of Drufo is a lie, correct?
Yes, because he never sent any sort of email like that to anyone at Lush.
However, if you had seen that email, you would have been put on notice for dangers associated with Drufo. A yes or no answer will do.
Yes.
But you cannot say for certain that this email has been deleted from Lush records. A yes or no answer will do for this question as well.
Yes, I can say for sure that I know it wasn't deleted from our records because it never existed.
Okay. I want to talk to you now about Lush's priorities as a company. You have stated that the environment is Lush's #1 priority, correct?
Of course, and like I stated earlier, 10% of our profits are able to go into our charities saving the environment.
And a yes or no answer will do for this question. The first 18 lines of your witness statement are about your success and environmental awards, correct?
That is very much correct. Yep.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Does the defense have any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Is Lush fertilizer carcinogenic?
No, like I stated earlier, there's no internal
objection. This is a leading question.
Response.
Your Honor, my question does not state whether Drufo is or is not carcinogenic. I'm asking whether it is.
The court's going to find that it was a question. It was not a leading question. A leading question suggests the answer. Just because it calls for a yes or no response doesn't make it leading. The objection is overruled.
Is Drufo carcinogenic?
No, Drufo is not carcinogenic. We've done our own internal research, and any valid external research shows that Drufo is not carcinogenic.
How much money would your company have lost if it had baked its products?
Over $10 million. And at that time, you guys understand, that's a lot of money for a smaller company to lose.
What would you have done if Drufo was found to be carcinogenic?
If it was found to be carcinogenic by valid research, I would have immediately found a replacement for it, because obviously it was a failure of our own design.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect? Or I'm sorry, recross?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. The witness is excused. Can the defense call their second witness, please?
The defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Skylar Weirs, I'll remind you that you are still under oath.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Skylar Weirs, spelled W-E-I-R-S.
Let's begin by discussing your work. What is your occupation?
I am an investigative journalist.
What type of work do you do as an investigative journalist?
Well, I also write about my research, and I've recently been looking at modern agri-tech, but before that, I looked at the causal relationship between corporate policy and individual health. I authored a series of articles on that, actually, and recently, like I said a little before, my editor picked me to write a series on modern agri-tech.
Do you write for a specific magazine?
I do. I write for The Rationalist.
What types of articles are typically published by this magazine?
So the Rationalist is published by the Rationalist Society, which is a nonprofit organization that's devoted to promoting scientific skepticism in a healthy manner and stopping pseudoscience, irrational beliefs, things of the sort.
What have you spent time researching recently?
I've been looking at modern agritech and fertilizers, especially, and coincidentally, right before Dakota was diagnosed, I authored an article investigating the relationship between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Your Honor, I move to admit Skylar Weirs as an expert in the field of modern agricultural technology on the basis of her knowledge.
Expert, I'm sorry, in the field of?
Modern agricultural technology.
And the plaintiff's position?
Plaintiff would request to voir dire the witness.
Okay, please.
Do you have a degree from an accredited university?
I don't have a college degree, but really I don't need one. I spent so much time researching, and I've looked at really respected institutions like the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association for State Departments of Agriculture, and I've done so much research. I honestly doubt anybody has the same perspective I do. Besides, my knowledge specialties are really just general knowledge with historical and statistical information, so I don't need a college degree for that.
Okay. And do you have any of the articles with you here today?
Any of my articles here with me today?
Yes.
No, I do not.
Do you have a list of sources that you used to write your articles to prove the reliability of the testimony that you're about to give?
As I stated before, I looked at primarily the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association for State Departments of Agriculture. I also looked at the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So I've looked at some pretty public and respected institutions.
Do you have a list of any studies that you've conducted regarding the field of modern agritech?
Well, I haven't conducted any studies, but I've looked at hundreds, maybe even more.
Do you have a list of these studies with you, of every study with you here today?
No, it would be extensive and really long.
Okay. And can you define modern agritech?
Agricultural technology is the technology that goes into agriculture, which includes, horticulture, entomology, a lot of things that really include plants, trees, animals, everything in relation to humans, especially.
Okay. Your Honor, the plaintiff objects to this witness being as an expert, as she, number one, does not have a degree from an accredited university, and number two, does not have the studies with her that her testimony is based off of. And she did not know what that technology specifically was. Pursuant to Rule 702 of the Federal Rules for a Civil Trial, an expert witness must A, have scientific knowledge of the subject matter that she is testifying to, and B, her testimony must be the product of reliable principles and data collection. And since she has no list of her sources as I studies to today, the court has no proof of the reliability of her testimony.
Ben's response.
Your Honor, I would refer to the pretrial ruling, the court's pretrial ruling, which states that if Ms. Weirs testifies to her considerable time researching agritech companies, those facts are sufficient to establish that Ms. Weirs has specialized knowledge beyond that of an average person. To be entered as an expert, the witness only needs to meet one of the 5 qualifications, and I am entering her as an expert on the basis of her knowledge. There is no reason for her to need to have the studies with her. She has testified that she has researched it and that she has the knowledge necessary to be entered as an expert.
So an expert can be qualified under education, knowledge, or experience. I am finding that this witness does have specialized knowledge that would assist the fact finder. So the court will receive Ms. Weirs as an expert in modern agricultural tech and can render opinions in that area.
Let's move on to talking about pesticides. From what you've learned from your research, what ingredients are commonly found in pesticides?
Most pesticides contain arsenic, glyphosate, and nitrogen. Arsenic has been categorized by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a carcinogen, and glyphosate is a possible carcinogen. Nitrogen has been known to have some adverse effects, and synthetic nitrogen is horrible for the environment.
How do these pesticides work?
Pesticides, by definition, are a poison, and similar to herbicides, they kill. Herbicides especially kill common weeds like clover, for example. But the thing is, clover and other weeds are really important because they pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and deposit it into the air, into the soil, which allows the soil to support the grass typically used in lawns. Without it, it just wouldn't be able to support it. And without weeds, we'd have a lot of issues.
From all of these different pesticides, did you find any ingredients that were notable?
I did. Nitrogen. Nitrogen has been known to have adverse effects like cancer, thyroid issues, in pregnancy, neural tube defect, methemoglobinemia, which is more commonly known as blue baby syndrome, and more.
What is the significance of these pesticides that are in other grass seed products?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What is the significance of these pesticides that are in other grass seed products?
Well, like I mentioned above, most pesticides contain ingredients like glyphosate, arsenic, nitrogen, synthetic nitrogen especially, and all of them are either terrible for the environment or have been categorized as terrible for humans. They're really toxic chemicals.
Let's now shift our attention to Drufo. What is Drufo?
Drufo is a chemical bonding agent used in lush fertilizer.
How does Drufo work?
Drufo bonds to both the soil and the plant, making it really effective, and it reduces the solubility of the nitrogen in it, which means that nitrogen doesn't run off and contaminate groundwater or, create dead zones, which are positive environmental effects. Furthermore, Drufo reduces the use of pesticides, and because of its low solubility, actually, it only needs to be applied 1 to 2 times annually, unlike other fertilizers that need to be applied 5 to 6 times.
Let's now address your relationship with the plaintiff. How do you know each other?
I am Dakota's fraternal twin.
What concerns do you have with Dakota's employment at Havens Landscaping?
I'm really not one to point fingers, but you heard Dakota testify that they didn't protect her from the toxic chemicals. She was running around wearing shorts and short sleeve shirts and no mask around toxic chemicals that have been categorized as carcinogens and are known to have bad effects on the human body. So they did not protect their employees. Who lets a minor run around unsafely?
Why are you choosing to testify against your twin?
I stand by my research, and Lush is a good company. They've done nothing but good for the environment and the world.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Plaintiff Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. So your knowledge in agritech has been all from unaccredited institutions, correct?
Unless you count the USDA, the NASDA, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer as unaccredited? No.
And you believe that GMOs and agricultural products have been really political lately, correct?
Well, yes. You would be surprised to learn that over 800 million people die from malnutrition, which is more than HIV and AIDS. And that comes from the terrible things that companies do to, spread, to spread misinformation about their plants and crops and their fertilizers because they just want money.
A yes or no answer will suffice for the next question. So your testimony could be biased, correct?
Biased in what sense?
You just testified that you had a political opinion, and that could politically bias your testimony, correct?
Personally, I didn't think I testified to any political opinion. I was just saying that many companies are greedy for money.
A yes or no answer will suffice for the following question. You had a falling out with your family, correct?
We did.
Objection. Relevance.
Response.
Your Honor, I'm simply trying to get to the point of what her motives for testifying in this trial may be. Family, as the plaintiff is a family member, this could be a possible reason for her testifying in this trial.
Any reply?
No, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. Bias is always relevant.
Yes or no answer will suffice for the following question. So you could just be doing this all to get back at your family, correct?
Absolutely not. That is ridiculous. Like I stated, I am here for my research, not because I hate my twin or my family.
Yeah. Okay. And do you work at Applebee's?
Well, yes.
Objection. Relevance.
Response?
Your Honor, if you would let me continue on, I'm attempting to establish the witness's credibility.
At this time, I'm going to overrule the objection, but let's make it relevant quickly, please.
Okay. And are you working this job as a journalist because are you working this job at Applebee's because your journalist career is not generating significant income? Yes or no?
That's not true.
Why are you working this job?
I'm working this job because I'm in debt. I do have issues. I mean, obviously with money, but I'm working multiple jobs and I'm making ends meet. Okay. I'm paying my debt off by myself. I'm making ends meet. I work 2 jobs.
Okay. But as a journalist, is your income based on the amount of articles that you sell?
Well, slightly. I mean, isn't that how income works? I make money based on whether I write or not. And I also make money based on how much I sell.
Okay. Yes or no answer will suffice for the following question. So since you're not making sustainable income from journalism, you're not selling very many articles, correct?
I mean, like I said, my income doesn't completely depend on the number of articles I sell. So I am making enough money as a journalist. I just also have to relieve myself of debt.
Okay. Where does that come from?
I was a gambler. I'll admit it. It's because I have an allergy to grass and I kind of fell in a hole with March Madness a few years ago. And, it's really not that relevant because, like I said, I'm paying the money off. I'm working multiple jobs.
Okay. And just one final question, and a yes or no answer will suffice for this question. Is it possible that your articles are not selling very well because they are not very accurate? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you. Defense, redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Are you testifying because of a bias against your twin?
No, I sympathize for Dakota. It's terrible that she has cancer. Who wants to have cancer? But like I said, I'm standing by my research because it's the right thing to do. Lush is not a bad company. They're only trying to help the environment and their customers. Lush is possibly one of the safest fertilizers out there.
Are you motivated by money?
No, that's ridiculous. Dakota is my only twin. I admit that I'm in debt, but like I said, I'm making enough money to make ends meet. I'm doing my part to help myself. I did not testify for money.
No further redirect, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Is it a possibility? I'm not asking if this is true. I'm asking, is it a possibility that your testimony could be biased due to your relation to the plaintiff?
No.
So it's not a possibility?
No.
No further questions.
Thank you. This witness is excused. Defense, please call your third witness.
The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Dr. Williams, I'll remind you that you are under oath.
And before we begin, I'd just like to have a moment to change my name. Okay. Let's start. Doctor, please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Devin Williams, Williams.
Let's start by talking about your education and experience. What is your education?
I got my PhD from the Colorado State University, which is in Fort Collins, and I did a post-grad program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah.
And how long have you been leading Lush's toxicology research and development labs?
7 years.
How long have you been working for Lush as a whole?
I've been working there for 10 years.
What do you need to know as the leader of Lush's research and development labs?
Well, I need to know lots of things, but I mainly need to know 2 things. I need to know how to research and evaluate test results, and I need to know how to use environmental interventions and biomolecular markers and biochemical agents in order to determine the fate of toxic chemical agents.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to tender Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology research and development on the grounds of her education and experience.
I'm sorry, toxicology research?
Toxicology research and development.
People's response? I'm sorry, plaintiff's response?
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will receive Dr. Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology research and development, and she will be allowed to render opinions in that field.
Let's discuss DRUFO. What is DRUFO?
DRUFO is a chemical binding agent in Lush fertilizer, and it prevents nitrate runoff, and it's what makes our company environmentally friendly.
Is DRUFO banned anywhere around the world?
Yes, it's banned in Europe.
Why is DRUFO banned in Europe?
It's not banned in Europe because of cancerous risk. The EU produces laboratory tests on nitrates.
Elaborate more on those laboratory tests.
Basically, the EU takes all new fertilizers and new fertilizer chemical compounds and puts them in a petri dish. And they basically pair it with the right type of bacteria. And while our fertilizer significantly reduces the amount of nitrogen produced, it still has nitrogen in it. And therefore, when it's put in a petri dish with that bacteria, it produces the same amount of nitrates as any other fertilizer, but that's not what happens in nature.
Let's talk more about the cancer risks, or let's talk about the cancer risks, if any, with DRUFO. Is there any risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma with DRUFO?
No, there's no statistical increase in non-Hodgkin lymphoma compared to any other fertilizers.
And why can't you just say that it doesn't cause cancer?
Well, because that's not how science works. If you take a large group of people, it is statistically likely that they will develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other cancer for that matter, simply because they are a large group of people.
Did you look at any other data pertaining to users of DRUFO?
Yes, of course we did.
Does any of that data show a risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Nope, that data showed no statistical increase compared to fertilizers and with any other cancers for that matter.
Why do you compare DRUFO to other fertilizers?
Because if you want accurate and valid data, you need to compare apples to apples or fertilizers to other fertilizers.
I'd like to move on to discuss the study conducted by Dr. Casey Rogers. Have you read the study conducted by Dr. Casey Rogers pertaining to DRUFO?
Yes, I have.
And what's wrong with Dr. Casey Rogers' study?
Well,
objection leading.
Permission to respond, Your Honor? This is not leading. It does not suggest an answer. It's an open-ended question. I'm simply asking what is wrong with the study.
Any reply?
While that question is a yes or no answer, the wording of that question does imply that there is something wrong with the study, thus being leading.
So I don't think the question's leading, but it certainly lacks a foundation. We don't even know that Dr. Williams objects to Dr. Rogers. So I don't know that you can question on why she doesn't think that it's correct. So if you could lay a little more foundation.
Of course, Your Honor. Is there anything wrong with Dr. Casey Rogers' study pertaining to DRUFO?
Objection, foundation.
Response?
Your Honor, I was laying foundation.
So I think he's laying foundation there for her opinion. He's already laid foundation that she has reviewed the Dr. Rogers' report. So I believe that there is a sufficient foundation for this line of questioning. I'll overrule the objection.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Is there anything wrong with Dr. Rogers' study pertaining to DRUFO?
Yes, in my opinion, there's multiple things wrong. For example, Dr. Rogers only takes 3 groups, one of which has never stepped in a garden, one of which takes a hobby for a garden, and people who depend their income on gardening, such as farming. And with these groups, they're obviously producing extremely different lifestyles and are therefore exposed to many different chemicals and bacteria and environmental conditions.
Is there anything else wrong with the study?
This study has also never been peer reviewed and it's never been replicated.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Plaintiff Cross, please.
Yes, Your Honor. You work for the defendant, correct?
Yes, I work for Lush Fertilizer.
And you are a chairman on the board of that company, correct?
Yes, I'm the chairman of ethics.
So your company and therefore you have a financial stake in this case, correct?
Well, yes, they're obviously my employer, so I do work for them.
Lush performs in-house studies for their new products, correct?
Yes.
An in-house study at Lush may have a bias in those results in their favor, correct?
Well, they are producing that study, but it's still sound science. If they are given one answer or another, they can't control that.
When did you begin working at Lush?
About a decade ago.
At that point, most of the Drufo team had left the company, correct?
Yes, some of them had.
So you were not involved in the development of Drufo?
Not in the very beginning part, but obviously I've been a part of the development team since then.
Let's talk about the EU regulations. Lush fertilizer is banned in the EU, correct?
Yes, but not due to cancerous risks. It's due to those laboratory tests that I previously stated about and how they don't like the nitrates produced. It has nothing to do with cancerous risks.
And the company you work for chose not to fight those decisions, correct?
Yes, unfortunately, we were such a new company at the time and we didn't have all of the resources entailed to do that, but we do plan to fight that decision and that ban later on when we get more information, which I'm sure we will do.
So you plan on submitting your new findings to the EU for reconsideration on this topic?
Yes, because we know that our product is going to benefit this world so much, and we want to make that such a better place, and having our products that helps the nitrate runoff and reduces that runoff will help the world around us. And if we can spread that around the world, that's our goal.
A yes or no answer will be fine for this next question, please. With what you just stated, the loss of this lawsuit today could create many new roadblocks in getting the new approval in the EU, correct?
It might change the perspective, but those laboratory tests are applied to nitrates, and therefore the ban is about nitrogen.
Considering cancerous risks with your fertilizer being known to be carcinogenic, if this case results in that, that could create problems in getting EU approval, correct?
Yes, that may cause problems, but it's not carcinogenic.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Defense, redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Why is Drufo banned in the EU?
It's banned in the EU because of the laboratory tests that I talked about. And in those laboratory tests, they specifically focus on nitrates and the nitrates produced in the Petri dish, and it has nothing to do with cancerous risks. And that's why it's banned, because of the nitrogen. But we know that our product significantly helps those nitrates. And unfortunately, those laboratory tests just don't accurately replicate what happens in nature with our product.
Sorry, permission to stop time real quick.
Please head out front of the north office.
Apologies, Your Honor.
No worries, please continue.
And why didn't Lush fight the ban in the EU?
They were such a new company at the time, and obviously being a small company and fighting a Europe decision takes a lot of resources. And while we didn't have that at the time being, we plan to fight that ban in the future because we know that we can help, and our new studies will show the EU that.
And finally, is Drufo carcinogenic?
It is not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further redirect.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please.
Your company does have the resources now or in the near future to fight that EU decision, correct?
Yes, we do. We're just finalizing our studies.
However, if this product is found to be carcinogenic, that would make it extremely hard to have this legalized in the EU, correct?
That can make it difficult, but our product is not carcinogenic.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further recross.
Thank you. This witness is excused. Is the plaintiff prepared with their closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Your Honor, members of the jury, this case comes down to one thing: corporate greed. This is a case about a company valuing its image and money more than the safety of mankind. Today, you have been shown beyond a preponderance of evidence that Lush Fertilizer was negligent in their inclusion of Drufo in their products. First, you heard from Ms. Dakota Weirs about how she was robbed of her livelihood because of Lush Fertilizer's product. She was on her way to becoming a musical genius, then playing piano. Her one true love and sole remaining connection to her grandfather was stolen from her because of a fully preventable illness. Lush cared more about their profit than the value of human life, causing Miss Weirs to lose her passion and her joy. Then you heard from Carson Durst, a chemical engineer that studied the effects of Drufo, about how Lush knew about the dangers of Drufo. They knew about the harm their product would cause, yet they released it to the masses anyway. They knowingly and negligently sold poison for profit. Lush put the public in danger because of their greed and need for more. Carson Durst told you how Lush had the power to protect its consumers, yet they ignored that responsibility in favor of money. Then they marketed their product as being good for the environment in order to save their reputation. So instead, they hardened the public and they caused Dakota Weir's illness. Lastly, Casey Rogers, an expert in the fields of agriculture, horticulture, and chemical effects on the human body, explained Drufo's danger. He explained what Drufo is, why it's so dangerous, and the danger it causes. Dr. Rogers conducted a controlled and scientific study that clearly showed that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is caused by environmental factors. Drufo is one such factor. And Weirs was in an environment with Drufo for an extended period of time. Dr. Rogers clearly demonstrated that Lush Fertilizer caused Weir's illness and the pain it causes her today. Lush knowingly made fertilizer with poison that causes cancer, and Lush chose not to warn its consumers. Life is precious, but in Lush's opinion, not more precious than money and a good reputation. Drufo is a dangerous chemical that cost Dakota Weirs everything. Her life is ruined because of Lush's negligence. Members of the jury, today we ask you to rule in the plaintiff's favor because it is clear beyond a preponderance of evidence that Lush Fertilizer neglected the value of human life and including Drufo in their products. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defense have a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
There are two words that can be used to describe this case. The first, responsibility. Lush is a responsible company, a company that cares about cancer, a company that cares about climate change, but most importantly, a company that cares about people. And it shows. Why do you think that they are environmentally friendly? And how do you think that they've successfully developed a cure to nitrogen runoff? The answer to both questions is through this so-called dangerous chemical, Drufo. The plaintiff speaks of Drufo as if it's some wild, dangerous chemical that causes cancer. This is not the case. What happened to Dakota Weirs is truly awful. But the fact is that for 6 long years, Dakota was exposed to a number of chemicals besides Drufo that could have caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma, such as pesticides, as suggested by Dr. Casey Rogers. Now, the second word that describes this case is negligence. Which brings us to another fact stated by Dr. Rogers. Dakota was exposed to all of these environmental conditions for 6 years without proper clothing or facial protection, despite being told to wear it. Beyond any of this, we need to note that Drufo does not cause cancer. The responsible experts, the people that get their studies peer-reviewed, the people that get their studies replicated, and the people that compare the correct variables are the people who are telling us that Drufo is not only not dangerous, but is a huge improvement for the environment and the people in it. Members of the jury, you have heard 6 testimonies today on the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, a person with a tragic story, but a person who was irresponsible in the face of danger when they didn't wear any sort of protective gear whatsoever. Carson Durst, an ex-employee of Lush who has clear motive to want to push Lush into the ground. And Casey Rogers, a person here who doesn't feel the need to replicate or peer review his studies, a person who compares unreasonable variables, a person who conducts improper studies, gets incorrect results, and calls it science. And on the defense, Skylar Weirs, a remarkable journalist and a master researcher who's done countless hours of work to find the correct answers. Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, who knows the ins and outs of not only his company, but of the products that it creates, and also a responsible man, a man who donates to climate change companies. Ask yourself, does a company that donates to climate change organizations sound greedy to you? Can a company that has reduced climate change completely be considered greedy? And finally, Dr. Devin Williams, a doctor who has experience with Drufo and a professional who knows how to conduct a study responsibly, and an educated person who compares the correct things and gets the correct results. Jury instruction number 2 talks about the facts that the plaintiff has to prove in order for their claims of negligence on behalf of the defense to be considered true. The first thing that has to be proved, that Lush manufactured Drufo. This, of course, is true for environmental reasons. The second thing that has to be proven, that the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating a risk of harm. The defense decided to not waste their money on unreasonable care because none was necessary. The third fact that needs to be proven is that the plaintiff was one of the people that the defendant harmed. While the plaintiff has an awful disease, as you've heard, Lush is not at fault. Not at fault because Dakota has been more negligent than Lush. The fourth and final fact that needs to be proven, the defendant has damages that were caused by the defendant while the product was being used in a manner that the defense should have reasonably expected. Again, there were damages, but none were caused by Lush fertilizer. And finally, the product was being used with no protective clothing and no protective gear, despite warning labels and advisement from the employer providing the fertilizer. If the plaintiff fails to prove even one of these things, you must vote in favor of the defense. Furthermore, members of the jury, the burden of proof is preponderance of the evidence. Whoever brings you more evidence will succeed in the trial. Tell me, has the defense not met their burden? Has the defense not supplied enough evidence to prove that not only is Drufo not dangerous, but that the plaintiff is negligent? Negligent because they conduct improper studies, get improper results, and wear improper equipment in the face of danger, even when they are informed of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the plaintiff have rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Could I please get in the chat how much time I have remaining? Thank you.
Please proceed.
Your Honor, this case is about corporate greed. Carson Durst testified that they used the extra money saved from not baking their Drufo for company gains. They took this risk in taking out a harmful chemical from their product to help themselves, and they told you that today. They needed extra help with money in the beginning of their business because of the regulations set on them. A responsible business would have met these regulations despite not having money. If a company does not have enough money to create safe products, should they be a company at all? Secondly, Skylar Weirs did not have adequate definitions for agritech. Her experienced field that she proves to be an expert in. Also, Skylar Weirs testified that it was Haven Landscaping's fault for Miss Weirs not wearing protective clothing and that it was not enforced. Miss Weirs testified that the landscaping company should have told their employees, which they did not, proving that it is not Miss Weir's fault that she did not wear the protective clothing. And this causes the damages that we are sitting here today for. Miss Weirs has non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and it causes many damages beyond just that. It has compromised her immune system and caused her to lose her lifestyle and everything she loves within that. You said that we claim Drufo to be a wild, dangerous chemical. However, and you say that's false, but that is clearly shown to be true with Dr. Casey Rogers' study. We've shown that Drufo does cause cancer and is harmful to the public. Then Dr. Williams speaks of Drufo, does not speak of Drufo having cancer. You say that we don't prove that Drufo causes cancer, but you never prove that it does not. So you do not disprove our claims and only speak of the environmental changes, not the actual human impacts that it has. Also, lastly, the defense is also responsible for exercising reasonable care. Lush should have seen the circumstances their product was advised to be in and complied with those sets. Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, jury.
Thank you. Okay, now everybody take a deep breath. Congratulations, you got in the first one in the books. So I'm going to give the scorekeepers a few minutes to make sure that all their scores are tallied. I just want to give a few comments while they do that. Amazing job. Both of the openings were amazing. Clear thoughts and corporate greed and not our fault. My comments are going to be about exhibits. So exhibit number 2, which is the European version of the label, no relevance with Dakota. Who cares what Dakota knows? Very relevant when you're talking about Dr. Rogers. That absolutely would have come in later. So when you tried to move it in, the only basis we had was that it was a valid translation from French to English. Okay, who cares? It does matter later because you get to say, in fact, Drufo was so bad, you took it out and then released it in Europe, right? So it's very relevant later, just not relevant through Dakota. Pay attention to objections. So the exhibit 3 was admitted and there was an objection saying that it's hearsay. Absolutely hearsay, I agree with that. But then the response was, we're not admitting it for the truth of the matter asserted, we're admitting it for the effect on the listener. Great, so it comes in. Then they spent the next few minutes reading from it. That is absolutely the truth of the matter asserted. So the only reason it was let in was for effect on the listener, but then they didn't use it for effect on the listener. They actually used it for a hearsay objection. So I don't remember who it was. Somebody made an objection that's hearsay. You're absolutely right. They managed to get it in, then they go right back to hearsay, object again, because that would have been improper testimony as to that document, right? The only reason that document was admitted was for the effect on Durst, not for what it actually does to rats. So again, great job by everybody. Just, think about your exhibits. If something doesn't come in, think of another way. If it does come in, make sure that it's being used properly. How are these scorekeepers doing? Have you had a chance to tally and submit your results?
This is Judge Long. I hit the submit button and it said internal error. So I took a screenshot of all of my scores and I'm re-entering them now. So thank you, technology, for continuing to disappoint humans.
Mr. Toole, how are you doing? Okay with your scores?
Yeah, all complete.
Okay, if you want to take a few minutes and give some feedback.
Sure. First of all, congratulations, everyone. Great job. It can be nerve-wracking, especially in technology when you're staring at yourself throughout the process. So very, very well done. Just highlighting both plaintiff and defense that your open-ended questions and your leading questions, I think you both sides did a really good job in your ability to phrase those questions correctly and regarding which side you're on. So very well done on that. And I was really pleased and happy to see when it got into objections in citing appropriate law in regards to why you're objecting. I know there was a few times for both sides that you did that, and it was very well done. It seemed that you knew those pretty well and that you were able to cite them properly. So very well done, especially when it came to entering Skylar Weirs as an expert. And it was a good back and forth between the two of you to get your point across and try to get her in or out. So well done on that. Those are my comments, Judge.
Perfect. Thank you. Judge Lung, how are you doing?
I'll pass to, I think it's Mr. Bailey.
Bailey?
Comment next.
Mr. Bailey, how do your scores go? Okay.
My scores are in, and I'd like to get a recording of Judge Lung passing it to me. I'll take advantage of that at some point. I thought you guys did a great job. And I'm a practicing attorney. I try about a case a week in some way, shape, or form. And so I have some familiarity with a wide variety of skills and talent. I really want to take a second to call you out for your skills and talent. Really, you did a great job. The cross-examinations were generally exceptionally leading. One of the things that consistently came up in those cross-examinations was the cross-witness who wasn't answering yes or no. And there was at least an effort to try to force that, right? This question calls for a yes or a no answer. You got to do that. The judge is not going to, my experience, the court isn't going to enforce that rule. They're going to make you do it, and you got to control your own witness. And it's brutally hard. It's especially hard. I think this was true with even the experts in this case with an expert, because they're going to prattle on. So I want to really commend you for doing that and kind of for standing your ground. One of the things that I also liked in the case is the doctrines of primacy and recency, which means the first thing you say is the most important and the last thing you say is the most important. And that ties from everything from plaintiff's opening, where they're talking about selling poison. It ties into plaintiff's closing when they're talking about selling poison. I really like that. That really tells me both what your theme is, and it captures it throughout each of the various portions of the case. I also want to say someone sat down, and I wish I'm not going to have notes on it, but they sat down with a theme question. The last question that they asked was the most important question, and then they stopped asking questions, and then it got passed on to, I think it was a recross examination at that point. That's super powerful, because a lot of the time, the trier of fact, with all due respect to the judges here, sometimes they might be wandering off a little bit, and they might be thinking about what's for dinner, or they might be doing something else. And if you do that, they'll tie it in and they'll remember what that is going on. The other thing, and my last comment on a broad perspective, was I really enjoyed the storytelling. The the direct examination questions should always be designed to tell a story, so that you're kind of progressing through something and it sounds very conversational. You guys, I think that's the hardest thing to do as a practicing attorney. And you guys really did a pretty good job with it. So you're to be commended for your hard work, and you're to be commended for your beautiful performance today. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure we don't have a recording of the event, so I'm pretty sure Mr. Bailey will not get the evidence he wants that I passed to him. I wrote down some comments specifically to some folks, and now I don't see their student names on at least one of them. Let's see, Sasha, I think is one of the names I wrote down. A phenomenal command of the evidence, rules of evidence. It was just impressive. I think you probably won every objection there was, or at least most of them. The person who was Blake Doncourt was a witness. I wrote down Max. I'm sorry, I don't have all your names written out. Great job, expressive, inflection. You were controlling all aspects. And I think it ties into what Mr. Bailey said about storytelling. And that was a great job. I think there was a clear, for all those witnesses on that side, there was a clear intent to not be reading your testimony, to memorize it, and that you were, you had inflection, you were expressive. So great job on that. Some advice on, it was Rose, I think it was the opening statement. Some advice on the opening statement. It was all good information, but I think you used the phrase "you will hear" a lot, and it becomes kind of repetitive. So my suggestion is that you try and find other phrases to use instead of "you will hear, you will hear, you will hear." It's accurate, that's true, but find another phrasing just so it's not repetitive. And I think that's everything. I know they told us to keep our comments short. And I agree with the other two folks. Great job today. A lot of really hard work is evident. You guys are really committed to your characters, and you really had a great command of all the information. And I appreciated the arguing back and forth. It was really well done. So great job on all sides. And I did get the scores in.
Okay, so I think we just have to wait. I think the courtroom monitor is going to give us the all clear so that we can leave and go on to next round assignments. So if everybody just wants to hang out, stand up, stretch your legs, get some circulation back in.
I had one question, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the witness, Carson Durst, was like looking at an exhibit and kept turning his head like sideways. And I was like, I'm wondering if he's doing this on purpose or if the exhibit is twisted. And I just was like, I don't know. It was interesting to me watching that happen. And I didn't know if it was a strategy or not, or if he was, it was just sort of hard to look away. It was funny.
Thank you very, very much to everyone who participated, particularly our judicial officers and scoring panelists. Ms. Page shares with me that it's time for you all to go report back to your Zoom room for those who are going on to the next round. And
actually 3:45.
Oh, 3:45 is what Ms. Page is telling me now. Is when we go to our Zoom room, so
For
they can
people
just
who are participating in the next round.
Okay, so then the other people are just
They all know what they're supposed
to do. Okay, y'all are supposed to know what you're supposed to do, and the next round will start at 3:45. So thank you very much for all of your help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so if I
Thank you.